Good evening, everybody.
I think
I will give a quick introduction of Vasundhara Gupta. She is a counseling psychologist and founder of Humraahi Psychotherapy, a therapist-led mental health organization based in New Delhi. She holds a bachelor degree in psychology and economics from Lady Shri Ram College for Women's, followed by a master's in applied psychology from TIS, Mumbai. She has worked extensively with individuals, couples, and families using trauma-informed, process-oriented approaches to healing. Her work combines clinical expertise with compassion and creativity, helping people understand their emotions and reconnect with what brings them in peace. Over to you, Vasundhara.
Thank you so much for that. Hello, everyone. It's really nice that so many people want to attend a workshop on reconnecting with joy, essentially. And if it's okay, I can start sharing my screen. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely fine. You can start sharing.
Okay, sure. Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah? Okay. So, hello, everyone. I'm really glad that you've joined this space today. We've titled it From Burnout to Balance, but I think it's always difficult to really find what the balance is. And it also looks different for everyone, right? So I just wanted to start off by emphasizing that this isn't a space about pushing through or fixing something broken. It's about slowing down and listening inward, to what's really been heavy for you and what's quietly asking to be remembered again. Um, as my introduction has been given already, I'd still like to introduce myself. I'm Vasundhara. I'm a counseling psychologist and a workshop facilitator. I've been working for close to 2.5 years now. I did my undergraduate studies from LSR in Delhi University, and then my master's in psychology from TIS in Mumbai. And the reason that I really wanted to hold this space is because it holds a deep personal and professional resonance for me in my work, especially with individuals, younger individuals in the workforce. I've seen how burnout doesn't simply look like tiredness. It can often lead to disconnection from yourself, from joy, and from meaning in life, which is why I love to hold spaces like this. I approach therapy and group facilitation from a trauma informed and process oriented lens, which essentially means that's just a bunch of jargon. But what that means is that I like to help people slow down and tune in and understand what's really happening beneath the surface rather than rushing towards solutions. And today, that's what I hope to do. I hope to offer a space that feels human, honest, and spacious, where we can reflect on what's been heavy for us and gently exploring what healing and balance really looks like for us individually. So, just as a gentle reminder, we're not here to fix anything. It's just a workshop that will help us come back to ourselves and look at ourselves with a little bit more care and intentionality. And I'm very, very glad that so many people are here. So I think I'd like to start off today with a bit of intention setting. So if everyone could use the chat box to tell us in one word how you're arriving today, and how are you feeling? Are you tired, energized, excited? I'm hoping that for at least some of you, this is the end of the workday. So feel free to use the chat box to let us know how you're feeling. Am I going to be able to see the chat box? I'm not able to as of now. Will I have to stop sharing my screen to see the chat box, Suman?
No, 1 second. I'll just do the required settings. 1 second.
Sure.
Just give me a moment, Vasundhara. I'm doing the. You can keep on, speaking, and
I can
I'll.
stop sharing and see the chat box also, because I just like to know how people are really feeling today. You know? Okay, chat. Um, how do I see? Yeah, I'd like to stop sharing and see the chat box. Chat box. Oh, it's in the Q&A. Chat is disabled. Okay. So I think you'll have to enable chat box.
I have enabled. Now everybody can, chat.
Okay.
Yes. Now we can see the
Good.
messages coming.
Great. So everyone, how are you really feeling today? How are you arriving? How's your body feeling? Tired, low. Yeah, it's Thursday at 5 p.m. So thank you so much for joining in. Insomnia. Hmm. Excited, sleepy, confused. Okay. Range of emotions. Overload of work and headache, right? I think the reason that I always start workshops with asking uh, attendees to just tune in is because it helps to really soak in the information that we're going to be talking about. Because an hour-long workshop can seem a little heavy at times. So I think at different moments of time in the workshop, I would like for us to just put out in the chat box how we're really feeling about whatever's going on. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering, everyone. Really appreciate it. I'm just gonna start sharing screen again. Okay. So I think before we dive into reflection, I would like to take a moment to just talk about what burnout is. Burnout is now a World Health Organization recognized ailment, which stems from ongoing accumulated emotional exhaustion due to unmanaged work, related stress, and pressure. This exhaustion leads to depleted energy, discouragement, and a negative attitude towards work at times, which impairs effectiveness and relationships. And often we associate burnout with just being tired, but it's a lot more layered than that because burnout affects how we feel, how we relate to ourselves and others, and how we experience meaning in our life. And research identifies three core dimensions of burnout, actually, and I'll walk you through each one of these slowly. And as I speak, you can begin to notice what resonates with your own experience. There are a few questions that we'll use to reflect how burnout is impacting us currently, and you're welcome to make a note of it and bring it up later. So, according to psychologist Christina Maslach, who pioneered the study of burnout, there are three key dimensions to it: emotional exhaustion, disconnection, and a reduced sense of accomplishment. So, emotional exhaustion, which is probably the most familiar part of burnout, is the feeling of being drained physically, emotionally, and mentally. Like you're running on fumes, you may wake up tired, struggle to find energy for things that you once enjoyed, or feel like you're constantly pushing through the fog. If you're starting to feel like this, it's important to turn inward and ask ourselves, where do I feel this exhaustion in my body? How long have I been carrying it? And what is this exhaustion really telling me? What does my body need from me? Second is disconnection. And this is a part that often goes unnoticed because when you start to feel disconnected from your work, from the people in your life, and even yourself, it's not very visible to the people around you, but it can feel like feeling numbness, detached, and feeling like you're just going through the motions. So you might catch yourself saying something along the lines of, I don't recognize myself these days, or work has become so monotonous, life has become so boring and monotonous, or that you feel distant from the things that you used to care about. At times like this, it could be really important to ask ourselves, when was the last time I felt present or connected? Who or what has helped me feel grounded and alive in my life? Lastly, we talk about a reduced sense of accomplishment. And this dimension hits your sense of self worth, which can be very, very heavy. So even when you feel like you're doing your best, it may seem like it's not enough, or you might start to question your competence, your contribution to things, your value, and things that once gave you a sense of purpose might now feel a bit meaningless or out of reach. So at times like this, we can ask ourselves, have I started to doubt myself more? Do I still feel proud of the way that I show up at work, with relationships, for myself? And what would lead to me feeling a little bit more fulfilled? Now, I know that we're going through the dimensions of burnout, but I think I'd like to remind you all that burnout is not a sign of failure. It's a way of your system's way of saying that you've been holding too much for too long. And it's important to keep listening to that voice that our body's sort of telling us and attend to that voice with a bit of care. So burnout doesn't just take away our energy, it starts to take away our presence. We become emotionally flat, we can feel disconnected from our own needs, and we forget to notice the smaller things. We forget to notice the little things like food, music, laughter, maybe catching a nice movie, or just taking a nap. We feel like we're watching our life happen and not really living it. So I think here's something that I'd like to offer you all today, that the opposite of burnout is not productivity, it's presence. And the way back to presence that's often overlooked is something really simple, and it's just joy, right? When we start to feel burnout, joy gets pushed to the margins, and we start to see it as an optional thing that, okay, we'll get back to joy when everything else is done, everything else settles down. But it's important to remind ourselves that joy is not a reward, it's a resource in our life. It helps us heal, regulate, and remember that we're more than just coping. Even neuroscience shows us that joy can actually activate our parasympathetic nervous system, supporting rest, digestion, and emotional regulation. Even psychologically speaking, as a therapist, joy builds resilience. So it reminds us that good things still exist in life, even when we're struggling. So I think I'd like for us to take a moment to just reflect on what comes to our mind when we think of the word joy. And again, we can use the chat box for the same. Your daughter, that's so sweet. Family time. Very nice. Playing a sport, yeah. Good food, taking a stroll under good weather, feeling of no liability, traveling to a new place, being around my loved ones, shopping. Yes, shopping is very joyful. Sleeping, yeah. I think it's so interesting to me always to see how joy can look so different in people's lives. What else? Meditation. Yeah. Running is a great one. Movement is a very, very good way to reconnect with our body. Cake. Yes. Walking. Yeah. Worry-free mind, outing, meditation and yoga, enjoying a TV show, reading a comic book. Yeah, although those are really, really fun things to do. Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. I think it's always so fun to see what makes someone else happy. So I think I'd like to ask you all. Wait, I'm not able to share screen. Ish. Okay, there you go. I think something that is then an important question is what blocks joy for us, right? Because if joy is the thing that gets pushed to the boundaries and it shows up in so many important ways like movement, family time, good food, watching movies, watching a fun television show, reading a book, what then comes in the way of joy in our lives? Anxiety, yeah, workload, yeah, overthinking. Sudden bad news, yeah, a lot of external factors at the moment. Work, I think work can be a big, big um, EMI. Yes, agreed. Too much news consumption. Absolutely. I think given the current state of political affairs, social media and news can be really overwhelming to look at. So I think mindful consumption of news is very important. Leave issues, uncertainty, mobile phone, yes. Husband's aggressiveness. When a family member is unwell, yeah, that sometimes things may go wrong. Responsibility, diseases, weather. Hmm. I think there's such a host of Bangalore traffic. Yes. Traffic anywhere can be, I think, a steal of joy. Agreed. Thank you so much for letting us know. I know that it's never easy to talk about the difficult things that are coming in the way of you feeling happy. So thank you so much for letting us know. So as we're talking about the factors that block joy for us, I think I'd like to introduce you all to a psychological concept that we use in therapy, but I think is very, very applicable to anyone who's living life. And it's called the window of tolerance. I think for a moment, I would like you all to imagine your mind and your body as having an internal zone where you feel most like yourself, feeling calm, focused, grounded, and emotionally balanced. That is your window of tolerance. It's a concept developed by Dr. Dan Siegel to explain the range of emotions and experiences we can manage and process without feeling overwhelmed or shutting down. So, when you're within this window of tolerance, you can think clearly, you can respond and not just react. You can feel emotions, even the difficult ones, without being overwhelmed by them. You can feel safe, steady, and regulated. And we all have different sized windows. So, some people might have wider ones where they can navigate situations without being thrown off. And others, especially those who live with chronic illness or chronic anxiety, stress, or other sources of trauma, may have narrower windows. But everyone's window can shift based on the rest, safety, and support that we offer it. So this is not a, your window of tolerance is not set in stone. It's something that we can actively work on. So, what really happens when we're outside of our window of tolerance? So, when someone pushes us or something pushes us beyond our capacity to cope, we leave this window of tolerance and our ideal emotional zone and enter a sort of survival state. This is an automatic nervous system response that we oftentimes don't have in our control. So, we can either go towards hyper arousal, which is above our window of tolerance, where we feel anxious, restless, overwhelmed. We can feel angry, reactive, very hyperactive, where we're not able to sit down or slow down. And we feel like everything has a sense of urgency and threat attached to it. So it can often feel like our foot is stuck on the gas pedal and you're always feeling on. Or we can move down towards hypoarousal, which is a freeze or shutdown mode, where we start to feel numb, disconnected, tired, or unmotivated in our lives. And it starts to feel like you're just going through the motions of life. You start to feel foggy, spaced out, and detached from your emotions. So this is like pulling a handbrake, and like everything slows down, everything comes to a stop. So why does understanding the window of tolerance really help us with our work and life? When we're outside of our window of tolerance, we lose access to certain parts of ourselves, like our clarity, our empathy, creativity, and our ability to connect with others as well as ourselves. So, when we're outside of this zone, we might start to snap at colleagues or avoid communication with others. We can feel stuck, blocked, or incapable of handling certain difficult situations. And we might even withdraw from people or tasks that we really care about. And we start to lose joy in the things that we used to earlier enjoy and give us happiness. And over time, repeated stress without any kind of recovery or rest narrows the window further, making it harder to function without being pushed outside of that window of tolerance and without uh, being overwhelmed suddenly. So, have you ever noticed that, sometimes it's hard to enjoy even the good things when you're overwhelmed or burnt out? That's not just in your head, it's actually how your brain and body work. think of it like an emotional zone. And when you're inside the zone, you feel calm, you feel present, and you feel like you're able to handle things well. And when you're outside of the zone, you can start to feel anxious, irritable. You might lose out on confidence. You can feel disconnected, exhausted, even. And when we're outside of this window of tolerance and we're experiencing either hyperarousal or hypoarousal, our body is simply focused on surviving. It's not focused on finding happiness. It's not focused on enjoying the good things in our life. So joy then becomes inaccessible, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your system is just in a survival mode. It's not trying to find joy, it's just trying to protect you from the bad things in your life, right? So sometimes, even if we want joy, we can't seem to access it. And the goal isn't to force joy, but it's to expand our window of tolerance slowly and steadily, whether that is through grounding, which can involve things like running, meditation, yoga, breathing exercises, whether it's through psychotherapy, like talking to a mental health professional, or spending quality time with individuals who really fill your cup, right? So at times like that, when we start to feel really anxious or shut down, it's important to then look inward and say, at this point in time, what might help me feel safe enough to allow joy in again, just even a little bit, right? So whether it's a short walk, whether it's seeing a sunset or a sunrise, whether it is engaging with anything that makes us feel a little bit more regulated in our nervous system. And this can then involve expanding our window of tolerance. And there are a bunch of ways to do this, as I mentioned, but certain things that we can short rely on are deep breathing, which sometimes can sound a bit kooky, but breathing exercises really help us be a little bit more in touch with our own body. When we start to notice our breath, we can start to then notice how our body responds and feels in certain situations. And then observation is what leads to regulation. Even the safe connection. So just talking to people who you feel safe with, connecting with individuals that bring you joy can oftentimes regulate you better and expand that window of tolerance. Even movement like running, like exercising, playing a sport, or even going out for a drive sometimes. Any kind of change of pace can help you regulate a bit better. And I actually am a huge believer in micro rest, right? So, taking maybe just 30 seconds or a minute out of a 1 hour stretch to just take notice of your surroundings and taking a real pause and just taking a step back. And I know that these seem like really, really tiny acts, but they help you expand your window of tolerance very, very slowly and steadily. So that when you're in that zone again of emotional regulation, joy has a chance to land when it comes your way. We have a chance of recognizing joy when it comes our way. So I think I'd like to ask you all, what are certain things that you have engaged in that have helped joy come back to your life? Painting. Yes, I think painting is a great activity to let some creative juices out and just regulate. Micro naps, talking to kids, very, very helpful. Music is a great one. Yoga, reading, yes, all really lovely activities to engage in. Google Maps, because can't travel. Making sure to go out with family every weekend, exploring different places, outdoor games, yes. Petting your dog, amazing. I think petting a dog is always a good dopamine hit. Spending time with a little daughter, so sweet. Plantation, tending to your plants, okay. Gymming is a great one. It's great endorphins. Cooking a healthy meal, that's a great one. Watering the bonsai, so lovely. Are there any activities that help you reconnect with your body a little bit more and help you notice how your body is responding to the stimulus in your environment? I think a question has come in. How do you know if someone is truly your tribe and not just fun to be around, but emotionally aligned and mentally safe too? I think that's a great question. I know that after the workshop is done, we'll be venturing into some question and answers as well. But I'd be happy to take that up right now. I think that's a very important question because I think once we enter adulthood, it can feel difficult to also manage friendships. But I think a good indicator of safe friendships and understanding whether someone is truly in your tribe is seeing whether or not they show up in your low times, is seeing whether or not you're able to really be vulnerable with them and they're vulnerable with you. Because I think that can be a good indication of an individual really being by your side and wanting to experience life with you, whether that's a partner, a friend, even a colleague, right? Okay. I am meditation, yoga to a certain extent where you feel relaxed. That's, yeah, I think meditation and yoga are great, great ways to get back to your body. I will go back to the PPT. Okay. So now that we've talked about expanding your window of tolerance, and as I said, these might seem like really, really tiny acts, but they really do help expand your window slowly and steadily. So it does require a bit of patience on our end. But when you're inside that zone again, joy is everywhere if we just have the ability to notice it. I think something that's important to also understand is that joy is not something that we can earn by doing more things, but it's something that our body can just start to feel when we feel safe enough to feel it. So the next time that joy feels a little bit far away from you, I think it's important to then ask yourself, what can make me feel more regulated at this point in time? Like so many of you have mentioned sport, yoga, meditation, talking to certain people in your life, spending time with quality loved ones, and even petting a dog. I think all of those are really, really wonderful acts which help your nervous system just slow down. And once we start to feel a little bit more regulated, presence will come side by side, and with presence comes along joy. I think I'd also like to maybe just talk about some actionable ways to bring joy into our routines. So I will name a couple of just smaller activities that we can do, and we'll do one of them right now in the workshop. Because joy can oftentimes feel very elusive and it can seem like it's hiding behind the shadows when we're busy, burnt out, or when we're constantly chasing deadlines, or when we're worried about whether or not our leave is going to get approved. But it's not something that we have to schedule or earn. It's something that we can just invite into our lives little by little, incorporating certain everyday activities, right? So I think I'd like to first start with just asking you all to bring a moment to your mind, however small that might have been, where you felt truly joyful or light. It could have been from yesterday or years ago. What were you doing? Who were you with? And what was the feeling that it left you with? And I can take your question after the workshop is done. I'd be happy to. Sure, I can repeat the question. I can also just share screen actually. So as I said, I'd like you to bring to mind a moment, however small that might be, where you felt truly joyful, light, and it could have been from yesterday. It can be from years ago. What were you doing? Who were you with? And what was that feeling that it gave you? I know it's difficult to think about joy as a feeling and think back to when was the last time that we felt it. So it can really be something as simple as walking in the morning alone, peaceful. I think that's great. I think walks can be such a great way of just incorporating some mindfulness as well. Food, having a chat with friends, enjoying good music, all such wonderful things. Watching a movie with family, outing, creating a bonsai with son, painting with daughter, so lovely. Meeting friends after 5 years, wow. The first time I broke a sweat after a long time. Yeah, that workout can feel always really, really good. It's after a long break. Going back to my school for an alumni meet, reconnecting with teachers, students, kind of just made me feel like there are people who look up to me, and that just became an elixir for me to push myself forward. That's so wonderful, Yash. Thank you for sharing. We can take as much time for this actually. 'Cause I know it's difficult for participants to also sit with what's been joyful for them. Would anyone else like to share? Yoga on a day with full reconnect. I think a lot of people here are fans of yoga. That's really lovely. Would anyone else like to share? Okay. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. I really appreciate you sharing certain personal moments with me. And I think it just leads to us seeing that there are so many things that can give us joy if we just had a moment to notice. So thank you so much. I think certain other actionable things that we can do um, are things that I'm going to talk about at the moment. And these are things that you can always note down or see how you feel even reading them, right? So, one of the first activities that I often have my clients do is incorporating micro moments of joy into their workday. So, I have them set a 60-second timer during their workday and just have them pause and reflect. What feels good in this moment? What can I appreciate in my environment? Can I stretch, smile, sip something warm? And clients will often come up with saying something along the lines of, I got up out of my desk. I did a little walk around the office. I noticed that I can smell some good tea coming my way. And I appreciate that I get to just have tea in the next 30 seconds. It can be something really, really simple. And incorporating just a micro moment of joy can really make you see that it is everywhere if you just notice. Research on positive affect actually shows that even brief experiences of joy can improve resilience and emotional regulation. And as I said, we just simply need to notice them. The second activity that I really love having my clients do is that at the end of the workday or at the end of their day, they can write down something that made them feel joy today. So just something that filled them with a bit of lightness, a bit of airiness in their chest, no matter how big or small. And this starts to cultivate a lens that we start to see joy through and trains the brain to recognize pleasure, novelty, and connection, even on those high stress days. Lastly, I have quite a few of my clients notice anchors in their day. And this is something I just call joy anchors for my own fun, where they identify one or two things that regularly spark warmth or delight, like a specific playlist, like a walk route, or favorite snack, or just texting one friend. and keep these activities visible or easy to access during your workday. So, as so many people have mentioned, yoga, meditation, going for a walk, food has been a big one in this conversation today. Even spending quality family time. These can oftentimes not be at your disposal, if at all, let's say in the middle of a hectic workday. So, even if it's something small, like listening to a particular song that is upbeat and makes you feel a little bit more alive, or having a specific kind of chocolate that gives you certain memories from your childhood. I think for me, that's mango bite. And I really, really just keep one around in my office to make sure that whenever I'm having a bit of a low day, I pop a mango bite and I'm like, yeah, life is worth living. It's so, so fun. And anchors start to interrupt this autopilot system that we start to function in. And it helps your nervous system associate certain actions with safetiness and lightness. And it sort of becomes like conditioning ourselves to see the joy and feel it by these certain smaller things that we start to incorporate in our day-to-day life. And I think the whole point of the workshop is also to make us recognize that joy is not really a goal, but it's a practice that we can then start to incorporate in our day to day, wherein we recognize that joy is just a way of showing up with a bit more presence for ourselves, with a bit more intentionality. Joy doesn't really need grand gestures. It's not about going on a trip every week, or it's not about getting a promotion every single month, but it's about remembering that there is a life outside of the inbox, outside of our to-do list, outside of our job title, and that building certain practices in our day-to-day can help us live a sustainable way to bring ourselves back to joy. Lastly, I do know that work, life, and the world at large can oftentimes feel overwhelming. And while spaces like this can help us pause and reflect and connect with ourselves, there are certain times when we need a little bit more support. And in those times, reaching out to a mental health professional is very important. It's not a sign of weakness, but it's a brave and compassionate step that you start to take towards yourself, for caring yourself, to take care of yourself a little bit more deeply. Um, at Humraahi Psychotherapy, we offer a grounded and a very non-judgmental space to explore what you're carrying, whether it's burnout, anxiety, life transitions, mood concerns like depression, or simply the weight of life on a day-to-day basis. We know that emotional pain doesn't look like a crisis always, and it can be a slow exhaustion, like the ones that you guys have mentioned in the chat box today. And it can often just feel like slow exhaustion after work, loneliness, the guilt of needing some rest, or just numbness when joy is not really able to enter our lives. Our team of psychologists work in a trauma informed and process oriented way, which means that we care about your story and not just your symptoms. We don't rush to fix, but instead we like to sit with you, your emotional concerns, and your emotional landscape, and support you in reconnecting with parts of yourself that have been silenced, shamed, or overlooked, or just we've lost connection with. Therapy with us is not about becoming someone entirely new. It's about coming home to who you already are. And whether you've been considering therapy for a while or you're simply curious about the process, we're more than happy to have conversations with you, ongoing conversations about mental health. And we believe that therapy is not just for when something is wrong in our lives, but also just a way to grow, reflect, and feel a little bit more present in your life, in your relationship with others, as well as yourself. Thank you so much, everyone. That brings us to the end of today's workshop. I'd be happy to take on questions and certain doubts, maybe, if everyone has.
Yes. So now we can start with Q&A. You all can start putting the questions in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer it.
Thank you so much for the hearts, everyone. I appreciate that.
If any one of you have any questions, you can put it in a chat box or in Q&A and we can, address it.
I think there was a question that had come in from Kanan, where they asked that can we actually experience joy if we are tolerating things that disturb your peace? I
Okay.
think that's a very important question to ask, Kanan, because um, I think the day-to-day concerns of our life can often start to feel very heavy if they start to pile on, right? And I think that's when it's important to recognize whether it is a more day-to-day concern or whether we're chronically feeling stressed out and overstimulated and overwhelmed. And I think in terms of chronic anxiety and stress, leaning on a mental health professional can be very helpful and sometimes necessary. At other times, it can also just mean taking a step back from the world. It can mean taking a step back from certain things that are really pushing you outside of your window of tolerance and pushing you outside of your capacity. And sometimes then prioritizing rest over the hustle.
Okay. So we have one question from Mr. Kaushik. What
Hmm,
psychosomatic issue we should be aware of?
right. I think that's a great question, Kaushik. So, for anyone who doesn't know, psychosomatic issues are concerns that show up in the body as physiological symptoms without any physiological causes. So, for example, certain clients will come in with gut concerns or high blood pressure or a lot of chronic headaches or migraines because of anxiety. So I think those three are the ones that I've seen most commonly. But even body ache, muscle pain, fatigue is something that we can be aware of when anxiety is at a peak, or even depression when it's at a peak. How to avoid the little but irrelevant spark points that turn to be very disturbing throughout the day. Hmm.
Actually, this is a very important question, and everyone
It is, yes, it is a very
facing in
important
day-to-day life.
question.
Yes.
So thank you for asking that, Arindam. I think, as I mentioned, when we're reaching a point of burnout, when we're on that edge of feeling so overwhelmed that the littlest of things starts to set us off, I think it's very important to then rely on things that we know are going to make us feel a little bit more regulated, right? And that, first of all, first and foremost, starts with observing things that we know are going to push us over the edge. So whether that is rude comment passed by a colleague or inconsideration that's shown by family members, observing and seeing how our body's really reacting to things like this. And I think creating a bit of distance between the dysregulation and the way that our body is feeling is very important at times. So understanding that there are certain things that do tend to set me off, how can I really recognize them? How can I plan for them, predict them a little bit better? And in those times, can I have a pre-decided sort of dopamine menu, or can I have a pre-decided set of coping skills that I can turn to that will make sure that I do not stay with that disturbing thought the entire day? I hope that that helps. How to manage the stress with family, work, colleagues. I want to go to the gym and work out, but I don't have time. I want to attend similar sessions, but my mental peace remains in some other zone. Right. Thank you so much for writing that in, Bip. And I think being overwhelmed by the different roles that we take on is a very, very common concern. I think when there are so many responsibilities on our plate, it's important to then start to recognize whether we can delegate some of the work that we are currently doing and whether we're prioritizing ourselves in the life that we're living. I think oftentimes, amidst the stress of family, work, colleagues, we forget that we ourselves are allowed to take up space in other people's lives as well as our own life. So, turning inward and realizing, are we able to take up the space that we deserve? Are we able to give ourselves the space and rest that we deserve? So, if you have the intention of going to the gym and working out, can we carve out a time where you might have had another responsibility and delegate that to someone else, or communicate effectively, setting a boundary with someone else that this is something that I have to do for myself because it will lead to me taking up a little bit more space in my life, right? I think that's a mental state that is very difficult to reach because work, family, colleagues can all get very overwhelming. But unfortunately, there are only 24 hours in the day, and we can't change that. But what we can change is our outlook on how much rest and priority we deserve in our life. Kaushik is asked when to know that I have to go for psychotherapy. Very interesting and very important question, because personally, I don't ever believe that there is a right time to go to therapy. I think that therapy is a space that is full of exploration, and growth. But oftentimes, for people, it can be a last resort, that things have gone overboard. I am feeling too overwhelmed in my day to day, and now is when I start to go to therapy. I think once we start to feel the anxiety or the mood concerns start to seep into our daily functionality is when we consider going to therapy. That are you able to manage the bare minimum in terms of food, sleep, and movement? If not, then it might be time to start seeing a professional. Am I able to maintain relationships? Am I able to show up for work? If not, then it might be time to just consider talking to someone about your needs and understanding them better. So the standard that we usually hold as a therapist and as a mental health professional is, if the concern, if the stress is not coming in the way of your day-to-day functioning, there are things that we can do ourselves that will help that stress be managed. But once it starts to influence your day-to-day, right? Let's say that your appetite has increased or decreased drastically, or there are psychosomatic symptoms that show up on a daily basis where they start to then come in the way of your daily functioning, it might then be time to consult maybe a physician or a professional. How to get back in a joyful state when worry comes back while enjoying? I think that's a great question. Thank you so much, Hemant, for bringing that in. I think in the current state of affairs that we live in a very capitalistic society, any kind of joy and rest comes with a barrage of guilt, because we feel like we're not being productive and we're not bringing in the money. But more often than not, something that I've seen countless times with clients is that they come back to work more productive. They come back to work feeling more rested and more motivated to work once they have had that dose of joy and recovery and rest in their lives. So at that point of time, it also becomes important to reflect on why there is so much guilt and stigma around resting and around doing things that are joyful, right? I think it also starts to become about the kind of environment that you would like to live in and how much you're going to be prioritizing your rest and recovery as a part of that. Because studies have shown time and time again that if we try to push through burnout by working more, it leads to a long-term dysregulated state for people, and it leads to longer leaves that they have to take. It leads to lower outcomes. So in the long term, resting and doing things that you find joyful can actually be more productive. What if cool down time increases? How to decrease cool down time? I'm not I'm not understanding what cool down time means. I'm sorry. Can you just clarify that? Um, Yash has asked, I'm naturally reserved and people at work say that I don't talk much. How can I learn to show up more visibly and connect meaningfully without feeling inauthentic or drained? What kind of boundary should I explore to protect my own mental peace while still being open to connection? I think this is quite common, Yash, because um, some people have more social energy than others. I think it's very important at those times to then find people and recognize which people you don't feel as emotionally drained by, and communicating to people effectively that you are naturally reserved or that you don't necessarily have that much energy to show up with. And that's not something to express with shame. I think it's generally the way that our bodies are designed, to be very honest. Some people have a little bit more energy than others. There's actually a particular theory that we read about in chronic fatigue and chronic illnesses, which is called the spoon theory. And it sounds a bit spooky to say, but it talks about how certain people have not as many spoons of energy that they're born with or that they feel when they wake up as compared to others. So simply going to work or catching a cup of coffee with a friend or reading a book might take up all of your energy throughout the day. While as compared to other people who can go to a disco or who can go for a run and show up to work as well, a proper 9 to 5, and do everything under the sun just because they're naturally born with a little bit more energy. I think at that point of time, it becomes very important to recognize, first of all, that that lack of energy is not because of any physiological cause, but also that it's completely okay to not want to be so extroverted all the time. I think showing up authentically is what keeps people energized. If you have to constantly put on a mask in front of people and communicate that you're enjoying something that you're not, that can actually lead to more drain, a more emotional drain than others. How to maintain or restrict over energetic nature, or sometimes it could be overwhelming as well. Um, I don't know if I understand what an over energetic nature means. Like, do you mean being extroverted? Okay. I don't think being extroverted is necessarily something to restrict, but I do know that sometimes individuals can feel a little overwhelmed if someone is coming at them with a lot of energy. So at that point of time, I think reading the room and recognizing what the energy levels are in the room, building some social skills regarding that is very important. And that's something that I've actually worked on a lot with clients where maybe they grew up in an environment which was very energetic in nature, and the workplace that they've come into, the kind of work culture they've come into, is very quiet and subdued. So it then becomes important to just notice and observe what kind of environment we're in and accordingly maybe match energy levels, and then find also avenues and spaces where you can be as energetic as you want to be, because I don't think there's anything wrong with being energetic or not energetic. I think it really just depends on our capacity of showing up.
Okay, we have one question in our Q&A section. How to
Okay.
overcome a heartbreak?
I think heartbreaks are really incredibly difficult to go through, but any kind of relational concerns, I think we want to rush through and we want to get rid of them as soon as possible. But that doesn't necessarily happen because as human beings, we're social animals and we thrive and feel alive by connecting to others. So the way to deal with the heartbreak is actually slow. It's very intentional and finding connection through other things and really relying on individuals around us who can make us feel heard and seen.
Okay. So I guess we have answered all the questions, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
And if there is any question which we have not attended, I'll just check.
I think I'd actually love to get a feeler from everyone in the chat box. How are you feeling? I know that we've talked about a bunch of things today, and how's everyone feeling after the workshop at 6 o'clock? Thank you so much for the hearts, everyone. Thank you, Yash. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you, Hemant. Glad you're feeling better, Kathy. Start off with a lot of things. Understandable, Sangeeta. I think we've talked about a lot of things that can be thought about a little bit more. And anyone, if you'd like to reach out to me, I can also share my contact information again. Feel free to reach out. Thank you so much, everyone. Very informative. I'm so glad. Someone, is it okay if I just share my contact information on the screen again? Is that okay?
Yes, it's completely fine. You can share your email address and
Okay.
contact number if somebody wants to reach out to you and consult you. It's
Sure. I'll
completely
just share the
Sure,
I'll
sure,
just share
sure.
the
You can put
screen
it in the
again.
chat box.
Sure. Okay.
Yes, lovely.
Okay.
Any one of you, if you want to consult Vasundhara, she has, her contact number
I
and
run a,
email
yeah.
address is mentioned. You all can take a note of it.
I'm so glad you've been in therapy, Ash. It's a really transformed experience. I'm very glad. Such good feedback, everyone. Thank you so much for taking out the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Vasundhara, for giving us
No
your
worries
time
at all.
and sharing your experience and addressing everyone's queries. Thank you, everyone, for joining and sharing your experiences with us. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Is it okay to leave the meeting now, Saman?
Yeah, I guess we are done now, and we have addressed almost
Yeah.
all the questions, so we can
Okay.
end the session.
Sure.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.